The silent harvest, the mining station New Queensland, drifted quietly through the asteroid field between Mars and Jupiter, its massive collection arrays gathering rare minerals from the floating rocks. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the observation deck, watching the automated drones work their endless dance among the stars. He had been commanding this station for 3 years, and the routine had become as predictable as clockwork. That changed when Lieutenant Sarah Kim rushed onto the bridge. Her usually calm face, marked with confusion and excitement, were detecting something unusual on long-range sensors. Multiple ships approaching from outside the solar system, but their energy signatures don't match anything in our database. Jake turned from the window and moved to the sensor station. The display showed 17 vessels moving in tight formation, their speed decreasing rapidly as they approached Earth's outer defense perimeter. What made them unusual wasn't their size or configuration, but the erratic power fluctuations coming from their engines. These ships appeared to be badly damaged, barely holding together as they limped toward human space. Open a general hailing frequency. Let's see who our visitors are and what they want. The response came immediately, not through normal communication channels, but as a complex mathematical sequence that the station's computers struggled to decode. When the translation finally appeared on screen, it was a simple message that would change humanity's destiny forever. We are the Velothi. Our world burns behind us. We seek sanctuary among the stars. We have heard that humans offer shelter to those in need. Please, we have nowhere else to go. The Velothi were unlike any species humanity had encountered before. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with crystalline skin that reflected light in rainbow patterns, they possessed a natural ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields. Their ships, though damaged, showed technology that fascinated human scientists. But what truly moved the Earth Council wasn't their advanced knowledge or unique biology. It was the recordings they carried of their home world's destruction. The Crimson Hegemony had arrived at Veloth Prime without warning, demanding immediate surrender and integration into their empire. When the peaceful Velothi requested time to evacuate their children and elderly, the hegemony responded by igniting their planet's atmosphere. President Shen Wei stood before the United Earth Assembly, her voice carrying across the packed chamber. The Velothi have lost everything except their lives and their hope. They come to us not as conquerors or traitors, but as refugees seeking a new beginning. Earth has always been a beacon of hope for those fleeing tyranny. Today, we have the chance to extend that legacy beyond our own world. The vote was unanimous. Earth would grant the Velothi full asylum and help them establish a new colony on Kepler-4 42b, a habitable world humanity had been surveying for future. Expansion. The joint colony grew faster than anyone expected. Humans and Velothi worked side by side, combining their technologies and cultures in ways that amazed both species. The Velothi's electromagnetic manipulation abilities proved invaluable for construction, allowing them to shape metal and energy fields with precision impossible for human tools. In return, humans shared their adaptive engineering and creative problem-solving skills. Within 6 months, the settlement called Haven had grown from a few prefab shelters to a thriving city of 40,000 inhabitants. Children of both species played together in parks designed to accommodate their different physiologies. Scientists collaborated on projects that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Dr. Amanda Foster had been working with Velothi healers to develop medical treatments that worked for both species. Their electromagnetic healing techniques, combined with human medicine, had already produced breakthrough treatments for previously incurable conditions. She was in the middle of analyzing tissue samples when every screen in her laboratory went dark. The lights flickered once, then died completely. Emergency power should have kicked in immediately, but nothing happened. She felt her way to the window and looked out at Haven's skyline. The entire city had gone dark, an impossibility given their multiple redundant power systems. 3 days passed before the rescue ship, UES Resilience, arrived at Kepler 442b. Captain Rebecca Thompson had pushed her vessel's engines beyond safe limits after Haven missed its scheduled check-in. What they found when they entered orbit defied comprehension. The colony was intact, but lifeless. Every building stood exactly as it had been built, but there were no life signs anywhere. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an empty city that had housed 40,000 souls. The away team found something even more disturbing in the colony's data cores. All records from the final week had been deliberately erased, replaced with a single message in an alien language that the ship's computers identified as belonging to the Crimson Hegemony. The message was brief and brutal in its simplicity. Velathi were marked for extinction. Any species that shelters them shares their fate. This colony has been harvested as an example. Earth is next. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb led the forensic team through Haven's empty streets, using every scanner and detection method available. What they discovered in the city's underground maintenance tunnels changed everything. Thousands of small devices, no larger than a human thumb, were attached to the walls. Each one showed signs of having contained organic material that had been completely dissolved at the molecular level. The hegemony had deployed a weapon that converted living tissue into energy, leaving behind only these small collection devices. They had literally harvested the colonists, both human and Velathi, transforming them into fuel for their ships. The forensic evidence suggested the process had taken less than an hour. 40,000 lives erased in minutes, their very atoms, stolen to power the machines of their killers. The rescue team found one final piece of evidence that would prove crucial. A partially damaged hegemony probe hidden in the asteroid belt near the colony. Its data core contained navigation information showing the location of the hegemony fleet that had attacked Haven. Admiral James Harrison stood in Earth's Strategic Command Center, surrounded by the highest-ranking military officials from every nation. The holographic display showed the probe's data in stark detail. The Crimson Hegemony controlled over 3,000 star systems, with a fleet of more than 50,000 warships. They had been expanding through the galaxy for centuries, absorbing or destroying every civilization they encountered. Earth's entire space force consisted of less than 500 ships, most of them converted civilian vessels with basic weapons. The numbers were impossible, the enemy too powerful, and time was running out. But as the Admiral studied the data more carefully, something caught his attention. The hegemony's technology was incredibly advanced in some areas, but surprisingly primitive in others. Their weapons were devastating, but slow to recharge. Their ships were massive, but maneuvered poorly. Most importantly, their entire military doctrine seemed based on fighting enemies who used similar tactics. They had never faced an opponent like humanity, a species that had spent its entire history turning disadvantages into advantages, transforming peaceful tools into weapons of war when survival was at stake. The probe also contained something else, hidden in its secondary memory banks. Partial communications between hegemony commanders discussing their next targets. Earth was definitely on their list, but they considered humans a minor threat, barely worth the effort of a full fleet deployment. They planned to send 100 ships to Earth, considering it more than sufficient to destroy humanity's primitive defenses. The arrogance in their communications was clear. They had grown so accustomed to easy victories that they couldn't imagine a species successfully resisting them. Sarah Kim, now promoted to commander for her discovery of the Velathi, proposed something unprecedented. The hegemony expects us to wait for them to attack, to cower behind our defenses while they choose the time and place of battle. But what if we don't? What if we take the fight to them? The room erupted in discussion. Taking the battle to an enemy with such overwhelming Numerical superiority seemed like suicide. But Sarah continued, presenting data she had gathered from the Velothi recordings and the captured probe. The hegemony had a critical weakness. Their harvest technology required specific conditions to function. The devices needed to be deployed in a pattern that created an energy field encompassing their target. If that field was disrupted before the harvest began, the entire system would fail catastrophically. The Velothi hadn't known this, hadn't been able to fight back. But humans had something the Velothi lacked: experience with electromagnetic warfare, and a complete disregard for conventional military doctrine. When survival was at stake, the War Council reached a decision that would have seemed insane to any other species. Earth would not wait for the hegemony to attack. Instead, humanity would launch a preemptive strike using every unconventional weapon and tactic they could devise. Mining ships would be converted into gravity weapons. Communication satellites would become electromagnetic pulse generators. Even civilian cargo vessels would be transformed into something the hegemony had never encountered. Kamikaze drones piloted by advanced AI systems willing to sacrifice themselves for victory. Asterisk. The reckoning storm, the emergency session, had been running for 72 hours straight in the underground bunkers beneath Geneva. Every major leader, scientist, and military strategist on Earth had been called to participate either in person or through secured quantum communications. The holographic table at the center displayed a three-dimensional map of local space, showing the approaching hegemony fleet still 6 weeks away. President Shen Wei hadn't slept in 2 days, but her eyes remained sharp as she processed report after report from humanity's scattered assets across the solar system. Dr. Amanda Foster presented her analysis of the harvest technology based on the recovered devices. The molecular dissolution process requires a specific resonance frequency to function. If we can generate an interference pattern at exactly the opposite frequency, we can create dead zones where their weapons simply won't work. The challenge is generating enough power to cover a significant area. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, studying the power requirements. Our largest fusion reactors couldn't produce even a fraction of what we'd need. But Marcus Webb, recently returned from Haven, had been working with the engineering teams on something extraordinary. What if we don't need to generate the power ourselves? Every star system has a massive power source already available, the sun itself. We could deploy a network of solar collection satellites, each one designed to channel and focus stellar energy into targeted electromagnetic bursts. The hegemony's harvest technology would be overwhelmed by the sheer amount of interference. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Using the sun as a weapon was theoretically possible, but the engineering challenges were staggering. They would need to build and deploy thousands of satellites in less than 6 weeks. The Brazilian representative, General Carlos Santiago, raised another concern. Even if we can neutralize their harvest technology, they still have conventional weapons that could destroy our cities from orbit. We need a way to prevent them from getting close to Earth in the first place. That's when Commander Sarah Kim presented her most audacious proposal yet. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter contained billions of rocks, from tiny pebbles to massive planetoids. What if they could turn the entire belt into a defensive minefield? The plan was elegantly simple in concept, but staggeringly complex in execution. Every mining vessel in the solar system would be recalled and retrofitted with specialized equipment. They would attach fusion drives to selected asteroids, turning them into guided missiles. When the hegemony fleet arrived, humanity would arrive. Millions of tons of rock ready to be hurled at them at velocities that would turn even small asteroids into devastating kinetic weapons. The enemy's large, slow-moving vessels would be sitting ducks for this primitive but effective attack. But Earth's preparation went beyond just military defenses. diplomatic channels that had been dormant for years suddenly blazed to life. The Vilathi refugees, those who had been off-world during the Haven massacre, had provided contact information for dozens of species that had suffered under hegemony rule. Secret messages were sent to the Corvani Trade Federation, the Zelathi Collective, and even the mysterious Void Walkers who inhabited the space between galaxies. The message was simple. Earth was going to fight, and anyone who wanted to see. The hegemony defeated was welcome to join them. The response exceeded all expectations. Within 2 weeks, ships began arriving at the edge of human space. Not warships, but cargo vessels, science ships, and mining vessels from a dozen different species. They couldn't fight directly, as the hegemony would destroy their home worlds in retaliation. But they could provide technology, intelligence, and most importantly, information about hegemony tactics and weaknesses. The Corvani brought detailed scans of hegemony ship interiors. The Zelathi shared encryption keys that would allow humans to monitor enemy communications. The Void Walkers, beings of pure energy who existed partially in another dimension, offered something even more valuable: the ability to hide human ships from hegemony sensors. Captain Jake Morrison had been given command of humanity's most ambitious project, Operation Lighthouse. Using technology provided by their new allies and combined with human innovation, they were constructing something unprecedented. Hidden in the shadow of Jupiter, protected by the gas giant's massive magnetic field, engineers were building a weapon that shouldn't be possible with humanity's current technology. It was a gravity lens capable of focusing and amplifying gravitational waves to create targeted spatial distortions. In simple terms, it could create artificial black holes that would last just long enough to tear enemy ships apart. The work was dangerous, and 3 stations had already been lost to containment failures. But Jake pushed his crews forward, knowing that every day of preparation increased humanity's chances of survival. His team included volunteers from every nation on Earth and refugees from 6 different alien species. They worked 20-hour shifts, sleeping in rotating bunks, eating while they worked. The diversity of perspectives led to innovations that no single species could have achieved alone. The Velathi's electromagnetic abilities allowed them to stabilize field fluctuations that would have destroyed human equipment. Human creativity found ways to bypass technical limitations that other species had considered absolute. 4 weeks before the hegemony fleet was due to arrive, disaster struck. A deep space monitoring station detected a hegemony scout ship at the edge of the solar system. It had arrived early, probably to gather intelligence for the main fleet. If it reported back about Earth's preparations, the element of surprise would be lost. Admiral Harrison made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. He ordered the immediate activation of Operation Dark Strike, sending humanity's fastest stealth ships to intercept the scout. Before it could transmit its findings, the mission fell to Captain Rebecca Thompson and the crew of the Resilience. Using Void Walker technology to mask their approach, they closed to within 1,000 kilometers of the scout ship without being detected. The attack had to be perfect. If the scout got even a partial message out, Earth's plans would be exposed. Rebecca waited until the scout ship was in the shadow of Neptune, where its communications would be naturally disrupted. Then she gave the order that began humanity's war against the Crimson Hegemony. 4 modified mining lasers, originally designed to cut through asteroid rock, converged on the scout ship's communication array. The beams sliced through the hegemony vessel's shields like they weren't even there. The scout ship tried to flee, but Rebecca had anticipated this. Debris from Neptune's rings, accelerated to 20% of light speed by magnetic rails, created a cloud of deadly projectiles in the ship's escape path. The scout ship's hull, designed to withstand energy weapons, was shredded by simple rocks moving at incredible velocities. Within minutes, the threat was neutralized. But the crew of the Resilience knew this was just the beginning. The main fleet would arrive soon, and when they didn't hear from their scout, they would come prepared for resistance. Earth's combined intelligence network, now including assets from 7 allied species, tracked the hegemony fleet's approach. In real time, the enemy had increased their numbers, bringing 150 ships instead of the original 100. But they still moved with the casual arrogance of a force that had never known defeat. Their formation was textbook perfect, designed to maximize firepower while minimizing blind spots. It was exactly what Earth's strategists had hoped for. A rigid, predictable formation would be easier to trap than a flexible, adaptive approach. The transformation of Earth's solar system into a fortress had been completed just days before the hegemony arrived. Every planet had been turned into a defensive position. Mars bristled with hidden weapons platforms. Venus's thick atmosphere concealed massive electromagnetic generators. Even tiny Mercury had been equipped with solar-powered laser arrays that could channel the sun's energy into devastating beams. But the real surprise waited in the spaces between worlds. Millions of pieces of debris, each one a potential weapon, drifted innocently through space. They looked like random space junk, the detritus of humanity's expansion into space. The hegemony. Sensors dismissed them as irrelevant. Commander Vorath Zan stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship Extinction, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger on his displays. The primitive humans had attempted to hide their preparations, but his sensors had detected energy signatures from their weapons platforms. He was almost disappointed by how predictable they were. They had concentrated their defenses around their whole world, exactly as 100 species had done before them. All had fallen to the hegemony's superior technology and tactics. These humans would be no different. Asterisk. The hegemony fleet entered the solar system in perfect formation, their harvest ships protected by circles of warships. They expected Earth to wait until they reached orbit before engaging. After all, that's what defenders always did, holding their fire until the last possible moment to maximize damage. But humanity had never been good at doing what was expected. As the hegemony fleet passed the orbit of Pluto, every piece of space debris in the solar system suddenly came alive. Navigation beacons became missiles. Communication satellites transformed into bomb delivery systems. Even obsolete space stations, abandoned decades ago, fired their last shots as the reactors overloaded in spectacular explosions. The hegemony fleet's perfect formation became a liability as ships trying to evade attacks collided with their neighbors. The automated defense systems, programmed to respond to conventional attacks, couldn't adapt to the chaos of millions of small objects attacking from every direction. Commander Vorath ordered his fleet to accelerate toward Earth, hoping to break through the chaotic debris field. But as they passed Jupiter, humanity's true trap was revealed. The gas giant's shadow had hidden not just the gravity lens weapon, but an entire fleet of converted mining vessels. Each one had been equipped with gravity beam projectors, crude compared to hegemony technology, but effective when used correctly. Jake Morrison gave the order from the lighthouse station. Fire everything. The space around Jupiter erupted with invisible forces as hundreds of gravity beams converged on the hegemony fleet. Ships designed to withstand plasma weapons and antimatter. Explosions found their hulls crumpling, like paper under the alternating compression and expansion of focused gravitational fields. The harvest ships, with their delicate collection equipment, were the first to fail. The destruction of their harvest technology created a cascade failure that spread through the fleet's networked systems. Ships trying to aid damaged vessels found their own systems corrupted by the spreading electronic virus that Earth's hackers had embedded in the harvest technology's control systems. But the hegemony fleet was far from defeated. Commander Vorath ordered his remaining ships to abandon formation and attack independently. Dozens of warships broke free from the gravity trap and accelerated toward Earth, their weapons charging for a bombardment that would turn the planet's surface to glass. This was the moment Admiral Harrison had been waiting for. As the hegemony ships approached Earth, they entered the range of humanity's solar weapon network. Thousands of satellites, each one positioned to focus and redirect the sun's energy, activated simultaneously. The space between Earth and the sun became a corridor of focused stellar radiation, temperatures exceeding those found in the sun's core. The hegemony shields, designed to absorb and dissipate energy attacks, were overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of power being directed at them. Ships literally melted in space, their advanced alloys unable to withstand the concentrated fury of a star. Commander Vorath watched in disbelief as his mighty fleet was torn apart by a species that had barely achieved faster-than-light travel. His tactical displays showed impossible readings. The humans weren't using advanced technology to defeat him. They were using primitive tools in ways his people had never imagined. Mining equipment as weapons, stellar energy as ammunition, even simple rocks as projectiles. His final transmission, sent to the Hegemony Council before his ship was destroyed, would change the galaxy forever. The humans cannot be harvested. They turn everything into weapons. They fight without honor, without rules, without the civilized constraints that govern warfare. They are chaos incarnate, and they will destroy the order we have built. His ship exploded moments later, struck by a deliberately aimed asteroid that had been accelerated to 90% of light speed. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but its effects would resonate for generations. Of the 150 hegemony ships that had entered the solar system, only 3 escaped to carry word of their defeat. The images they brought back showed something the Hegemony Council couldn't comprehend. A primitive species had destroyed one of their harvester fleets, using converted civilian technology and the natural resources of their star system. But more terrifying than humanity's victory was what happened next. Earth didn't celebrate or rest after their victory. Instead, President Chun Wei broadcast a message to every inhabited system in the galaxy, using communication codes provided by their rear. New allies. The Crimson Hegemony attacked our friends and murdered 40,000 innocent souls at Haven. They thought fear would make us submit. They were wrong. Earth remembers the Velothi. Earth protects its friends. And Earth is coming for those who would harm the innocent. Any species that wants to be free of hegemony rule, join us. Together, we are stronger than fear. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under hegemony rule for centuries suddenly saw hope. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated a harvester. Fleet and lived to tell about it. Within days, rebellions broke out in a dozen systems. The hegemony's control, built on the assumption of their invincibility, began to crumble as more species realized that the harvesters could be beaten. The Free Systems Alliance was born not in council chambers or diplomatic summits, but in the fire of battle and the courage of species willing to stand together against tyranny. Earth began sharing its unconventional warfare tactics with any species willing to fight. The Corvani learned to turn their trade ships into missile platforms. The Zealothi discovered that their agricultural equipment could be modified into devastating weapons. Even the peaceful Velothi survivors found ways to use their electromagnetic abilities in combat, creating interference fields that could disable hegemony technology. The galaxy would never be the same. The hegemony had created their own destruction. By attacking Haven, they had shown humanity the true nature of the universe, a place where the strong preyed on the weak without mercy. But they had forgotten one crucial fact about humans. When pushed to the edge, when their friends were threatened and their survival was at stake, humanity didn't just fight back. They changed the rules of the game entirely. The massacre at Haven had lit a fire that would spread across the stars, and Earth's fury would burn until every species in the galaxy was free to choose their own destiny. The hegemony had sown the wind with their cruelty. Now they would reap the whirlwind of humanity's. Vengeance, asterisk.